The heat is suffocating, a dry, scorching wave that sears the lungs with every desperate breath. Smoke, thick and acrid, chokes the narrow streets, painting the pre-dawn sky an infernal orange. From the docks, where flames devour the hulks of ships, an even more terrifying blaze leaps, consuming the massive warehouses of papyrus. The air fills with the crackling, tearing sound of parchment, as countless generations of thought, discovery, and imagination are reduced to ash. Scribes and scholars, their faces streaked with soot and tears, scramble in a futile attempt to rescue what they can, their hands burned by scrolls too hot to touch. The scent of burning papyrus, a sweet, sickening perfume, hangs heavy, a permanent marker of destruction. Each scroll, a testament to human curiosity, curls inwards, blackens, and disintegrates into a cloud of iridescent dust, lost forever to the voracious maw of the fire. The vibrant hues of illuminated texts flicker and die, becoming mere ghosts against the encroaching darkness. Panic grips the city as the intellectual heart of the ancient world begins to flatline, pulse by agonizing pulse. The cries of despair are swallowed by the roar of the inferno, a sound that promises not just destruction, but utter obliteration of accumulated wisdom. What force could unleash such a devastating blow, extinguishing the light of knowledge with such ruthless finality? But to truly comprehend the sheer tragedy of that moment, we must rewind, stepping back into a time before the flames, before the decay, to an era when Alexandria shone as the undisputed beacon of intellectual light. Imagine, if you will, the bustling port city around 250 BCE. The air hums with the polyglot chatter of merchants, philosophers, and sailors from across the known world. The Pharos Lighthouse, one of the seven wonders, pierces the sky, its beacon guiding ships laden not just with goods, but with knowledge scrolls destined for the city's crown jewel. Life here wasn't just about commerce, it was about the unfettered pursuit of understanding. Scholars from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond mingled in the shaded courtyards of the Mausoleum, the shrine of the Muses, which housed the great library. They debated Euclidean geometry, charted the heavens with Hipparchus, and discussed the circumference of the earth with Eratosthenes, whose precise calculations were astonishingly close to modern measurements. The city was a living, breathing laboratory of ideas, a testament to human potential when curiosity and patronage converged. People lived their lives under the benevolent shadow of intellectual inquiry, believing that the future was theirs to chart, one painstakingly copied scroll at a time. The atmosphere was vibrant, an intellectual ferment unlike anything seen before or since, a truly remarkable testament to human endeavor. This was a world that truly believed in the power of the written word, a belief that would soon be tested in the most brutal way imaginable. The genesis of this unparalleled intellectual powerhouse lies in the ambition of a single dynasty, the Ptolemies. Following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, his vast empire fractured, and Egypt fell to his general, Ptolemy I Soter. It was Ptolemy I, recognizing the strategic importance of knowledge and culture, who laid the foundations for the Mausoleum and, by extension, the library. His son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who reigned from 283 to 246 BCE, dramatically expanded this vision, transforming the library into an almost mythical institution. His goal was audacious, to collect every single book ever written, translated into Greek. Agents were dispatched across the Mediterranean, buying, borrowing, and sometimes even forcefully acquiring scrolls. Every ship entering Alexandria's harbor was searched for texts, which were then copied, with the original sometimes kept by the library and a copy returned to the owner. This relentless acquisition strategy amassed a staggering collection, estimated by some ancient sources to be as high as 500,000 to 700,000 scrolls. Within its hallowed halls, minds like Euclid formalized geometry, Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference and designed sophisticated maps, and Hipparchus pioneered trigonometry and astronomy, creating the first comprehensive star catalog. These were not just scholars, they were the intellectual titans of their age, fueled by an almost limitless royal patronage. The library was more than a building. It was a testament to the belief that knowledge was power, wealth, and the very foundation of civilization. This grand experiment, however, was built on an increasingly unstable political bedrock, a fragility that would inevitably challenge its lofty ideals. Even amidst this intellectual splendor, faint tremors of instability began to ripple through the Ptolemaic dynasty, the first subtle cracks in the seemingly indestructible edifice. By the late 2nd century BCE, the initial fervor for knowledge preservation began to wane. Royal patronage, once so generous and unwavering, became sporadic, entangled in the ever-shifting sands of dynastic squabbles, assassinations, and power struggles. Consider the reign of Ptolemy VII Physcon, who ruled for much of the late 2nd century BCE, a period notorious for its brutality and intellectual regressiveness. He expelled numerous scholars from Alexandria in 145 BCE, a purge that scattered some of the library's greatest minds across the Hellenistic world, essentially exporting the very intellectual capital the city had so painstakingly amassed. This was more than just a political maneuver. It was a clear signal that the value placed on pure scholarship was diminishing, replaced by a ruthless pragmatism. The library, once a sacred sanctuary, began to feel the chilling breath of political interference. Imagine a respected librarian, perhaps a man named Aristarchus of Samothrace, the last recorded chief librarian, seeing his requests for new acquisitions delayed, his staff reduced, and his carefully curated collection viewed with indifference, if not suspicion, by the ruling elite. It was a subtle shift, easily dismissed as temporary fiscal austerity, but it represented a foundational erosion of the library's purpose and security. This was not yet destruction, but a chilling prelude, hinting at a vulnerability that would soon be brutally exploited. The subtle tremors of neglect escalated into an earthquake of destruction with the arrival of Rome's most ambitious general. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar, embroiled in the Alexandrian War to support Cleopatra against her brother Ptolemy XIII, found his forces besieged in the city's harbor. Trapped and outnumbered, Caesar ordered his ships to be set ablaze to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. This act of tactical desperation ignited a far greater tragedy. The fires, fanned by winds, spread rapidly from the ships to the adjacent dockyards, then to the massive storehouses located close to the harbor. These were not just any warehouses. They were known to hold a significant portion of the library's overflow collection, potentially tens of thousands of scrolls. Ancient historians like Plutarch and Dio Cassius recount this event, though their numbers vary wildly. Seneca, in particular, cites the loss of 40,000 scrolls in this incident. While some modern scholars argue this was not the main library itself, but auxiliary storage, the sheer volume of lost knowledge is a fact that makes the stomach clench. Imagine the horror, the organized chaos of the docks, the shouts of soldiers, the frantic efforts to contain a fire that simply would not be subdued. The invaluable intellectual property, accumulated over centuries, was consumed not by direct malicious intent, but by the collateral damage of a brutal foreign conflict. This was the first major, undeniable blow, a chilling premonition of how easily the physical embodiment of human wisdom could be reduced to embers. The world had just witnessed an unprecedented, albeit accidental, act of intellectual vandalism, yet it would not be the last. Following Caesar's departure and Cleopatra's consolidation of power, a curious anecdote emerges that, at first glance, seems to speak of restoration and intellectual revival, but on closer inspection, only serves to highlight the true extent of the earlier damage. Mark Antony, in an extravagant gesture of affection and political alliance, purportedly gifted Cleopatra a library of 200,000 scrolls, taken from the Great Library of Pergamon, a rival intellectual center in Asia Minor. This gift was an attempt to replenish Alexandria's depleted collection. On the surface, it appears to be a generous act, a recognition of the library's former glory, and a concerted effort to rebuild. However, the very necessity of such a massive transfer speaks volumes. If only a minor collection or an overflow annex had been affected by Caesar's fire, as some apologists claimed, why would a gift of such magnitude be required? This gesture implies that the loss was far more significant than initially acknowledged, perhaps even catastrophic enough to necessitate plundering another great library just to partially recover. Furthermore, the act itself reframes the nature of intellectual property. Instead of zealous collection and creation, it became an act of territorial acquisition and political maneuvering. The reverence for knowledge remained, but the context had shifted, revealing a disturbing truth about the library's vulnerability. The idea that knowledge could be so easily transferred, or even forcibly taken, suggests that its inherent value was now subservient to political will. Something doesn't quite add up when a gesture of restoration involves such a massive act of literary plunder. For centuries, the popular narrative of the Library of Alexandria's destruction has been dominated by a singular, dramatic event: Caesar's accidental fire, or perhaps a later, more deliberate act. Everything pointed one way: a sudden, cataclysmic blaze that wiped out humanity's greatest collection in one fell swoop. But then, as modern historical inquiry deepened and scholars meticulously re-examined fragmented ancient texts, a far more complex and, frankly, more disturbing picture began to emerge. The revelation was not of one grand conflagration, but of multiple, smaller, insidious fires, both literal and metaphorical, that consumed the library not in a single dramatic burst, but over centuries. This wasn't a quick, clean execution, but a prolonged, agonizing dismemberment. The romantic tragedy of a single inferno gives way to the chilling reality of a slow, creeping decline, a death by 1,000 cuts rather than a single fatal blow. No single culprit, no precise date, no easily definable villain. Instead, it was a cascade of neglect, political maneuvering, religious zealotry, and economic hardship that gradually eroded the institution's foundation. This pivotal understanding shifts our focus from the dramatic singular event to the relentless, incremental forces that can dismantle even the most monumental human achievements. The narrative of sudden tragedy gives way to the chilling reality of systemic vulnerability, transforming our understanding of loss. This wasn't a flashpoint, but a protracted expiration, hinting at a far more unsettling truth about the fragility of knowledge itself. What the multiple fires pivot truly reveals is a deeper, more insidious narrative than any single catastrophic event could convey. The decline of the library wasn't just about flames. It was about the insidious impact of changing political regimes, dwindling resources, and perhaps most powerfully, shifting cultural values. After Rome's conquest, Alexandria's status as a preeminent intellectual center began to wane. The emperors in Rome often viewed the library's unique status with suspicion, diverting funds and influence away from it. Then came the rise of Christianity. What started as a small, persecuted sect grew into the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, bringing with it an intolerance for pagan knowledge and philosophy. Texts considered heretical or contrary to Christian doctrine were actively suppressed or destroyed. The Serapeum, a daughter library to the Great Library, which housed a substantial collection, was famously destroyed in 391 CE under the decree of Emperor Theodosius I, orchestrated by Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of cultural destruction fueled by religious zealotry. Imagine scholars like Theon of Alexandria, a mathematician and astronomer who flourished in the 4th century CE, or his daughter Hypatia, struggling to maintain a fragment of the intellectual tradition in an increasingly hostile environment. The sheer cost and effort required to maintain hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls, which are fragile and prone to decay, needing constant recopying onto more durable but expensive vellum, became an insurmountable burden without royal patronage. Nobody talks about the librarian who couldn't afford new papyrus, or the copyist whose salary was cut, or the crumbling shelves that weren't repaired. This was a slow, grinding decline, an agonizing intellectual starvation that hollowed out the library from within, long before any final, dramatic, symbolic act. While no single individual can be definitively linked to the moment of the library's final demise, the story of Hypatia vividly illustrates the chilling human cost of Alexandria's intellectual decline and the rise of intolerance. Born around 350–370 CE, Hypatia was an extraordinary philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician, the daughter of Theon of Alexandria, the last known head of the library's scholarly community. She taught at the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria, drawing students from across the Roman Empire, Christians, pagans, and Jews alike. Hypatia represented the very essence of the library's original mission, the pursuit of knowledge, rational inquiry, and open debate. She was a beacon of intellectual freedom in a city increasingly consumed by religious strife and political dogma. Her public lectures and scholarly pursuits, however, made her a target. In March of 415 CE, at approximately 65 years old, she was brutally murdered by a mob of Christian fanatics, believed to be Parabolani monastic laymen, who dragged her from her chariot, stripped her naked, flayed her with oyster shells, and burned her remains. This horrific act, orchestrated with the implicit approval of Patriarch Cyril of Alexandria, was not just the killing of a woman. It was the symbolic execution of an entire intellectual tradition. Hypatia's death marked the definitive end of Alexandria as a center of pluralistic, pagan scholarship. Her students scattered, her works were lost or suppressed, and the light of rational inquiry that had burned so brightly for centuries was extinguished. What was lost was not just a mind, but the very spirit of open intellectual discourse that the library had epitomized. The human cost here is immeasurable, a stark reminder that the destruction of knowledge is often preceded by the suppression of those who dare to seek it. With such a monumental loss, it's perhaps unsurprising that the story of the library's destruction became a battleground of competing narratives, each eager to shift blame and establish moral high ground. What was hidden, denied, or deliberately obscured were the complex, inconvenient truths, replaced instead by politically and religiously convenient fictions. For centuries, various factions had their own scapegoats. Some Roman historians, keen to absolve Caesar, minimized the damage from his fire. Later, Christians, after ascending to power, often pointed fingers at the pagan violence or previous Roman emperors, denying their own significant role in the suppression of pagan learning and the destruction of the Serapeum. Then came the myth of the Muslim conquest. A widely circulated, albeit unsubstantiated, legend claimed that when Amr ibn al-As conquered Alexandria in 642 CE, the Caliph Umar ordered the library's books to be burned, stating, "If these books are in agreement with the Quran, they are superfluous and need not be preserved, and if these books are opposed to the Quran, they are evil and must be destroyed." This narrative, largely appearing centuries after the event, became a powerful tool for anti-Islamic sentiment. Each group benefited from these simple, clear-cut stories. Caesar avoided being remembered as a destroyer of knowledge, Christians legitimized their cultural dominance, and later European powers demonized their Islamic adversaries. The silence around the prolonged, gradual decay and the shared culpability across centuries was deafening. The truth was too messy, too complex, and too damning for any single group to fully own. This elaborate web of blame-shifting created a historical fog, ensuring that the true, multifaceted nature of the library's demise remained shrouded in mystery. In the absence of definitive historical accounts, modern investigators, archaeologists, classicists, and textual scholars have turned to the fragmented whispers left in the historical and geological record. Their painstaking work has sought to peel back the layers of myth and propaganda, searching for tangible evidence of the library's fate. Archaeological excavations in Alexandria, particularly around the el-Dika area and the site of the ancient Serapeum, have yielded tantalizing clues. While the exact location of the Great Library itself remains elusive, potential remnants of subsidiary collections, lecture halls, and scholarly quarters have been unearthed, painting a picture of a vibrant intellectual campus that once sprawled across the city. Scholars like Luciano Canfora, through meticulous comparative analysis of ancient authors like Strabo, Plutarch, and Ammianus Marcellinus, have meticulously deconstructed the competing narratives, seeking inconsistencies and overlooked details. They scrutinize every mention of the library, every reference to its contents or its destruction, cross-referencing these against political events and religious shifts. The focus isn't on finding a single smoking gun, but on accumulating small pieces of evidence that collectively challenge the grand, singular theories. For instance, the complete absence of any archaeological layer showing a massive, citywide conflagration attributable to a single event under Caesar, or even under the Muslim conquest, lends weight to the theory of gradual decline. Instead, what emerges are layers of gradual abandonment, structural decay, and sporadic, localized acts of destruction. These investigations reveal a subtle but persistent intellectual erosion, a slow fading rather than a sudden obliteration, forcing us to reevaluate how we understand monumental historical losses. The human mind craves simple explanations for complex tragedies, and the story of the Library of Alexandria is no exception. This psychological need gave rise to a series of enduring, yet ultimately incomplete, false answers, narratives that point to a single culprit for the library's destruction. The most persistent of these are the theories blaming Julius Caesar, Patriarch Theophilus, or Amr ibn al-As. The Caesar's fire theory, popularized by figures like Edward Gibbon, posits that the accidental burning of a book warehoused during Caesar's siege in 48 BCE was the catastrophic event. While a portion of scrolls was likely lost, archaeological evidence and textual analysis suggest this wasn't the Great Library itself, nor was it a total destruction. Its scale was certainly exaggerated over time. Then there's the narrative that fingers Patriarch Theophilus, who presided over the destruction of the Serapeum in 391 CE. This was undoubtedly a major act of cultural destruction, obliterating a significant daughter library and its pagan contents. However, the Serapeum was distinct from the main library, and by this point, the main library's collection was already substantially diminished. Finally, the story of Amr ibn al-As, the Muslim general who conquered Alexandria in 642 CE, ordering the burning of all books, has been widely debunked. This account appears centuries after the fact and contradicts contemporary historical records from both Arab and Christian sources, which make no mention of such a decree or act. While each of these events involved some loss or destruction of texts, none of them singularly account for the complete disappearance of the library's vast collection over many centuries. These official explanations, while dramatic, fail to hold up under scrutiny because they oversimplify a multifaceted, protracted tragedy. They provide a convenient villain but obscure the far more intricate and disturbing truth of systemic failure. After sifting through the layers of conflicting accounts, archaeological findings, and political motivations, the closest truth regarding the Library of Alexandria's demise emerges not as a single, dramatic event, but as a drawn-out, agonizing process, a death by 1,000 cuts. The evidence overwhelmingly points to a confluence of factors, each contributing to the slow, relentless erosion of this unparalleled institution. It began with the initial political instability and dwindling royal patronage of the later Ptolemies, leading to neglect and the expulsion of scholars. Then came the collateral damage from military conflicts like Caesar's siege, which certainly destroyed significant portions of valuable texts, even if not the main library itself. As Alexandria transitioned from an independent Hellenistic capital to a Roman provincial city, its unique status as an intellectual hub diminished, and funding priorities shifted to Rome. The rise of religious intolerance, particularly with the ascendance of Christianity, played a crucial role in suppressing and destroying pagan texts and institutions, culminating in events like the destruction of the Serapeum. Economic decline further exacerbated the problem. The immense resources required to maintain, repair, and recopy hundreds of thousands of fragile papyrus scrolls simply vanished. Without the zealous commitment of its original patrons, and facing persistent intellectual and religious opposition, the library slowly withered. Its scrolls were not meticulously preserved or copied onto more durable vellum. They were left to decay, eaten by insects, or simply discarded as priorities changed. It was a gradual starvation of resources, a creeping indifference, and a cultural shift away from the universal pursuit of knowledge. The library didn't burn down in a day. It slowly faded over centuries, piece by agonizing piece. This more complex truth reveals a profound vulnerability. Even the greatest repositories of human knowledge are not immune to the slow, corrosive forces of time, politics, and changing societal values. We've navigated the complex currents of history, examined fires both literal and metaphorical, and pieced together the agonizingly slow demise of the Library of Alexandria. But amidst all the debates about dates, culprits, and motivations, one fact remains, perhaps the most disturbing of all. It's not just that the library was lost, but that we will never know the full extent of what was contained within its hallowed walls, and therefore what was forever erased from human memory. Imagine entire genres of literature now completely unknown to us. Medical treatises that could have accelerated cures for diseases by centuries. Philosophical schools of thought that offered alternative paths to understanding reality. Detailed historical accounts of civilizations that are now mere footnotes, if they are remembered at all. Mathematical theorems, astronomical observations, and engineering principles that could have launched technological advancements far earlier than they actually occurred. We are not just missing books, we are missing entire trajectories of human intellectual evolution. It's a gaping intellectual void, a vast black hole in our collective understanding of antiquity. What was lost is not merely a collection of scrolls, but a parallel universe of potential human achievement and understanding. We are left to speculate, to infer, to lament a profound absence, never truly comprehending the scope of what was annihilated. The greatest tragedy is not the burning of a building, but the obliteration of countless intellectual pathways, the silencing of voices that could have guided humanity down entirely different, perhaps more enlightened, roads. The sheer, unfathomable magnitude of that lost knowledge, its potential impact on our world today, remains the most haunting legacy of the Library of Alexandria. It is a loss that echoes across millennia, forever altering the course of human progress in ways we can only dimly imagine. The story of the Library of Alexandria is far more than a tale of ancient architecture and lost scrolls. It is a profound, cautionary saga that resonates deeply in our modern world. It tells us about the incredible, yet fragile power of human intellect and the institutions we build to preserve it. Alexandria's rise to unparalleled glory demonstrated humanity's boundless capacity for curiosity, innovation, and collaboration. Its slow, agonizing fall, however, serves as a stark reminder of how easily such magnificent achievements can be undone. Neglect, political expediency, economic hardship, and particularly, the destructive fervor of ideological and religious intolerance. These are the relentless forces that can dismantle even the most robust pillars of knowledge. The library withered not just because of fire, but because the will to protect, nurture, and value universal knowledge diminished. It is a testament to the fact that safeguarding our shared intellectual heritage requires constant vigilance, unwavering commitment, and an enduring respect for diverse perspectives. The echoes of Alexandria serve to remind us that the struggle to preserve knowledge, to foster open inquiry, and to resist the forces of censorship and destruction is an ongoing battle. The vast, unknowable void left by its loss should compel us to look at our own libraries, our own digital archives, and our own commitment to education with a renewed sense of urgency. The lessons of Alexandria are timeless. Knowledge is power, but it is also fragile, and its survival rests on our collective shoulders. If this kept you up at night, subscribe. We post dark history every week.